Hey everyone, my name is Tammy Davis. Thank you very much for joining me on today's video. I am actually not going to take the time to introduce myself and tell you who I am, other than by my name. If you're interested in learning more about me and why I say the things that I'm about to say, then please visit my website, synergessence.com. The link is in the description box below. You're also welcome to join me on Instagram and Twitter at TammyDavis8 to get to know me even more so. But really what I want to do today is, well, actually I've been talking an awful lot about xenoestrogens. I've been writing about it. And so I'm not the kind of person that will ever go out and just kind of randomly say something without being able to back up what I say. And before I say anything further, please understand that any suggestions and whether it's in this video or any other videos, please know they are just merely suggestions. My belief system is honestly everybody is different. And I don't mean everybody, I mean everybody. Mine is as different as yours, and how one person reacts to something is how one person reacts to something, and we can't count on that for anybody else. So it's very, very important to understand that a suggestion is just that. It's based on my own experience. And so on that note, like I said, there's over 7.5 billion people on the planet. It is absolutely impossible to predict how anybody is going to react to anything. But on the note of xenoestrogens, in my pursuit of kind of wanting to qualify what I'm talking about, I ran across a couple of staggering numbers. The first one was there are approximately 45 million. Oh, and by the way, I just got done with the hikes, and this has been on my mind the whole time, so I thought I'd just kind of run in before my next client call and talk about this. So at any rate, there's 45 million chemicals, approximately 45 million chemicals currently being used around the globe. 70,000 of those chemicals have been registered as having hormonal impact on the human body. Now, the interesting thing is an additional piece of information was a transcript that I ran across on a radio show where a scientist was, in fact, lobbying for more research to be conducted on these chemicals because her specialty happens to be in the area of fertility. And so she's really wanting to help figure out why, or which ones, more specifically, which ones are actually affecting us at the hormonal level. I say that's a waste of money. I get the whole idea of science and research. I love science and I love research. I do it all the time. Every single client, regardless of how long I've worked with somebody, all of my private clients get consistent, individualized research based on whatever they present. So in this case, I love science and research, but I feel like the idea of researching these chemicals to identify how they are affecting hormonal health in humans, for that matter, I mean, if it's affecting humans, it's affecting all of nature, is useless. Because if they're lipophilic chemicals, then they are affecting our body on the hormonal level. You affect one chemical, you affect all the chemicals. That's pretty much the extent of it. It doesn't really make any difference. A really good example I have of that is histamine. And we have, I can't tell you, everybody I talk to practically is referring to a degree of histamine intolerance. They have histamine challenges. Some people don't even know they have histamine challenges. But when I get, again, involved with them, and I've got 2 cases in mind at this moment, there's clearly histamine issues. But before I jump into that, allow me just to say that when we take an antihistamine, we are trying to control histamine. When we try to eat low histamine diet, we're trying to control histamine. And while there may be an immediate result, right, because we feel better, we don't feel the issues, the stuffy nose, the watery eyes, the itchy skin, or the pain in the belly kind of thing when we have histamine intolerance. That's not addressing the issue. It's only affecting one chemical. And see, the thing is histamine is not this nasty chemical that we have the way I'm perceiving it, my interpretation, is that we perceive histamine as bad, and histamine has some very important roles in the body. And there's, I believe, 4 different types of receptors. They affect the skin, the cardiovascular system, the digestive system, and so forth. and it is released through the immune system. And this will actually all come into what I was talking about here in a moment. So when we seek to control something, the more we need to control. Because if we're trying to control histamine, then we've already created we've altered. I'm not going to say dysregulation. We've altered the way the chemistry is functioning in the system, and ultimately we can cause other problems. Because, like I said, if we're taking an antihistamine for allergies, we could long term be causing problems on with the cardiovascular system. And the reason for that is because the histamine 1 receptor, as we already have identified it with its relationship to allergies, is also found in the endothelial tissues that line both blood vessels and the lymph system. And in fact, the H1 and the H2 receptors are relied upon for vasoconstriction and vasodilation. And so if you're already taking an antihistamine which blocks the H1 receptor, you've now caused a disruption to the histamine, because histamine has other functions. Okay, so you potentially could be bringing on your own histamine intolerance. Now, there's another reason why we have histamine intolerance. So, I know that there's some people who take antihistamines for allergies, seasonal allergies, and it's okay. I mean, I'm not against medication. If you haven't watched me before, please know that I'm not against medication, because part of my background does include pharmacology. So it's not that antihistamines are bad. It's just when we take them on an ongoing basis. Now, I say that because one of my clients, when I first started working with her nearly 3 years ago, told me at that time that she was taking an antihistamine for seasonal allergies. She was taking it seasonally. And the reason she came to me was for psoriasis. And we got really, really good. We got real far in clearing up, because she'd been living with it for almost 50 years. She's been living with psoriasis since she was about in her in middle school. And so she's in her 60s now. So she'd been living with it for quite a while. And so and it was full body. So we cleared up most of it, in fact, all of it, with the exception of it in one ear. And but come now, like I said, I've been working with her for 3 years. She's been real kind of she's been good about, well, she's not been real good about using it on a regular basis, the materials that I provided her, but she has been using it. And but this time she was wanting some more, and I produced some formulas for her. I reformulated some things based on what she was going through, and she didn't mention that she was taking any allergy medication. So I provided it, and all of a sudden the psoriasis flared up in both ears. And so she's contacted me back, and so we went down the list of everything she was taking, and then come to find out just this last week that she's been taking this antihistamine for every day of her life for years. Well, that would explain a lot right there, because what I was doing for her was trying to stabilize the histamine levels, and she was blocking it. Now, what's interesting is through the course of the research on her, and looking into that particular medication, and really kind of unraveling, because what I was more interested in was, truthfully, interactions at the liver enzyme. And this particular med, they don't even know how it's metabolized in the body. It's just being used. It's a very common one being used. It's been on the market for quite some time, but the statement in the publications is they don't know how it's metabolized. Well, at that point, I had to tell her, she's either got to stop the medication or she's got to stop the oils, because the oils do have the ability to stabilize histamine. It's not about controlling it. It's about stabilizing it, helping to bring, kind of restore some ease to the system. And in the process of doing such, there could potentially be an interaction at the liver level, at the CYP450 enzymes, because we don't really know what's going on there. And at any rate, she opted for an allergy blend that won't necessarily control the histamine, but it'll actually just help relieve symptoms and work with what she's currently using with the other blends. So that was what we decided to do for her. But in the process of kind of unraveling all of this for her so that I could explain it to her in a way that she could wrap her head around, I came across some interesting facts, which is what I had mentioned a little while ago, that the H1 and H2 receptors, H1 specifically, which is linked to allergies, is also lining. It's found in the endothelial cells lining the blood vessels and the lymph vessels. So now we have histamine in various levels, types of uses of histamine and the cardiovascular system, which brings me to my next client, who I can't thank enough for sticking this out, because while we've had our ups and our downs, more so on his end, again, this is why full disclosure whenever I work with a private client is absolutely necessary. And so oftentimes I've actually started having to say, are you sure that's because it's really getting old to find out after the fact that there's more going on. Now, in the video that I just recently released on male enhancement, this is the same client. Because he didn't tell me he was using male enhancement supplements. And he's been using them, I guess, for about 3 years, but he didn't tell me anything because he figured they were natural. And what's interesting is and I want to say thank you for the comment and the compliment on the last, or I guess it's more of an acknowledgement on my last video on the male enhancement. Blood circulation wasn't a problem for him. Again, when we're looking at histamine levels or histamine uses in the cardiovascular system, this man has been a heavy weightlifter, and he did some he lifted extraordinary amounts of weight with his legs, I'll put it that way, to the point where, and if you didn't see the last video, I'll explain briefly here, he had developed severe varicosity, and especially his left lower leg and ankle. There's some in the right, but not so much. At any rate, he had come to me with help for that, because it was pretty unsightly. I mean, I've seen some varicose veins on women, and I have to say that his lower leg and foot pretty much has outdone the varicose veins I've seen in women. And I've seen, well, let's put it this way, I work, and I still continue to work with Amish people throughout the country. I have spent an extraordinary amount of time in their homes when I was on the East Coast for a while, and have seen, I was witness to some pretty severe cases, but this gentleman takes the cake. It was pretty significant. At any rate, he wanted me to help him, so I started helping him, and we were getting good results. And then he started using apparently a male enhancement supplement without telling me. I'm trying to remember how this went. So he went on to take it, and then what ultimately happened, again, this comes back to, the blood circulation wasn't a problem, because what happened was he developed an ulceration on the outside of his ankle, at the left ankle, because ultimately the blood vessels, the vessels in his ankle and foot were breaking down. Now, when I first saw all this, I was, in my mind, I meant, and I'm knowing his history, there's a lot of growth hormone. Obviously, there's an immune system reaction happening, because when you lift, whenever you move, you break down tissue. Therefore, the tissue has to be rebuilt. So there's a hormonal immune interaction happening here in order to restore tissue that's being broken down under heavy stress. While varicose veins are definitely the result of hormonal dysregulation, a hormonal impact. So I started treating him for that. I kind of kept that in mind and was really working with the cardiovascular, the lymph, hormonal system, helping just to kind of stabilize it all. Also, part of it was helping to rebuild tissue. And of course, with an ulceration, now we have to heal tissue. So I was taking all of these things into consideration, and Ultimately, that ulceration healed up. Then he did fine, and we continued with what he was doing with the rest of the clearing out the varicose veins in his leg. And all of a sudden, he blew out on the inside of his foot, and we continued with the oils. I had to redevelop a formula that was going to heal tissue, and it started getting worse. Not necessarily well, it did. It just started. I mean, it started almost the irritation was crawling up his leg. Now, when I look at this, and especially when I found out with this other client, again, we're talking about two completely different health issues, but we're talking the same chemical. And this is significant here in a second. But in the meantime, with the aggravation, I came to find out that he was taking these male enhancement supplements, and he'd been taking them for off and on for about 3 years, and he'd been really taking a whole new one. And again, I don't think that it has anything to do with lack of circulation. I think it has everything to do with interaction between the oils and the supplementation. This is the reason why I've mentioned that natural isn't always safe, and you can't necessarily combine natural things. Now, come to find out, a lot of male enhancements aren't 100% natural. So I don't discount their effects. I believe their effects are good. I think that men are getting the results that they're looking for, which is a good thing. I'm just saying be careful what you combine it with. In this particular person's case, because of what was happening, and there was an increasing redness happening on his leg, he disclosed to me that he'd been taking these. I did my research, discovered what I found out. There is a link in that last video to about 2 pages worth of male enhancement supplements, and that's not all of the ones that are on the market. That's just the ones the FDA has looked into. And I think it's a worthy thing to look into. In fact, I should probably I'll put the link in this description box below. But that said, I did my research, and even though we're not really sure how all of these things are clearing the body, there is a potential, obviously, an interaction occurring, severe interaction occurring. It's not even questionable at this point. It's just like, you got to stop something. And in this case, I took him off all the oils, and he stopped the supplements. The oils, we had to at least let them clear his body for at least 2 weeks and kind of like let the body stabilize. And that's when he found himself an increasing amount of discomfort in his foot, because again, he's got this ulceration on his ankle. So now that he's been off he was off the pills, and off the oils, we let things settle down. We started him back on, and all I can say is it's remarkable what's happened in less than 2 weeks. I think it's been about 10 days since he's been back on oils, and again, with the discovery of histamine in the endothelial cells of the cardiovascular system, you can definitely see there's a histamine response happening. And so it really is about stabilizing the histamine. I'll tell you straight up that what I shared in my synergistance group is that carofylline oxide, which is found in a number of essential oils, has been very beneficial in stabilizing. And carofylline oxide is found in a number of, like I said, it's found in a number of essential oils. Which ones you use and what you mix it with, really just, it depends on what else is going on for you. That said, I'll just kind of give you some ideas. Roman chamomile, copaiba, black pepper, helichrysum, I know there's more, but I'm drawing a blank. But those are some ideas. But they all have different benefits for the body. So again, if you're taking anything that is a type of antihistamine, you don't want to mix it with those, because that doesn't just include allergy medications. I have to be real clear about that. Allergy medications are not the only thing that are considered antihistamines. There's a number of anxiolytics, that's anti-anxiety medications, that also have an effect on histamine. And that's a really interesting thing to bring up. The next point here with regards to chemicals in the environment, because histamine, when not stable, can lead to anxiety. Now, why is that? I've talked about this in previous videos as well, and that is because histamine levels are high. When histamine levels go up, there's a sign. That's a sign that estrogen levels are up. And in the past, I've just linked it to just high estrogen levels. But the interesting thing about it is I think we've got a first of all, estrogen is not just the chemical or the hormone that regulates a woman's monthly cycle. That's not all it is. It is actually a very important signaling molecule in both men and women. And we also have this relationship to the idea of estrogen dominance. Estrogen dominance does not mean your estrogen levels are high. It means that you're not making enough progesterone, and women are consistently, there's a lot of women being diagnosed with estrogen dominance, but it just means you don't have enough progesterone in the system, or there's not enough to, there's supposed to be like, how do I want to say this? They work off of one another, and so if that doesn't so estrogen dominance doesn't mean that you're making too much estrogen. It could mean that your estrogen and your progesterone levels are low. That's how I will put it. There's just not enough counterbalance there. And so the reason for that is, and this is the reason why I believe men struggle with low testosterone, because truthfully, it's not an aging thing. I know that it seems that way, but I disagree with that as well. It's not an aging thing. I think a lot of our degeneration as we get older has nothing to do, has less to do with aging than it does with the increase of crap in our environment. When you're looking at 45 freaking chemicals around the world, currently being used around the world, 70,000 of them have been registered as having a hormonal effect on the human species. That's significant. One of the, we can look at, like, for instance, DDT. Okay, DDT is still being used. It actually has a 10-year half-life. That means it exists in the environment for up to 10 years after it's been sprayed. And that is a xenoestrogen. And that's what I started this whole thing with, is on xenoestrogens. And xenoestrogens, or environmental estrogens, are lipophilic. Lipophilic means fat loving. It requires fat. All of us have fat on our bodies. There's oil, and it requires, it's like oil is a magnet, that they're magnetized. And when the oil and the chemical are present, then the chemical is transported and it's picked up, and it becomes a signaling, it can act like a signaling molecule. For as much cleanup as we want to do to the environment, it is impossible to do that at this point. 45 million. And again, like I said, it doesn't make any difference if they've studied them or not. If they are lipophilic, they are having an effect on our system. They're having an effect throughout the entire environment. So what do we do, right? So because these xenoestrogens are acting like estrogen in the body. These environmental estrogens are acting like estrogen in the body. This is the reason why I am a big advocate for paying attention to what kind of essential oils you're using, because essential oils, there's very certain ones that act like estrogen in the body as well. And when we have all of these chemicals, and yes, there are some that we can, control, and I'm putting a document together that I will share here as well with regards to xenoestrogens, where they are and how we can begin to mindfully eliminate some of them. We can't control it all. And that's the biggest challenge that I think we're facing right now, is these xenoestrogens are acting like estrogen in the body. They are undetectable on blood tests, which means it doesn't show up as you have high estrogen levels. It's just acting as the signaling molecule. And like I said, estrogen is a very important signaling molecule, as it actually activates the immune system. It also starts the process that influences autonomic nervous system activity. And we have increasing levels of blood pressure problems. We have increasing levels of fluid regulation problems. We have a high level of autoimmune disorders because, again, like I said a little while ago, when histamine is high, it's a pretty good indicator that estrogen's up. Even if your estrogen levels test out normal or low, you still have higher levels of estrogen, chemicals acting like estrogen in your body, which is going to activate the immune system. I think one of the biggest challenges I have currently is that I read all over the place how the immune system is weak. Guys, if you're alive and you're not feeling well, your immune system's not weak. It's actually working. Our challenge is that society has so many expectations of us and demands that we don't allow ourselves to restore and we're constantly trying to control these symptoms. Now, I don't have a problem with symptom relief, because symptom relief ideally is stress relief. But truthfully, we are all on chronic survival mode. Our bodies are on high alert because we are being inundated. I mean, if those numbers are accurate, I've been checking out the American Chemical Society. I mean, it's just astounding what we're exposed to and what they know. And I mean, I get that there's a lot of research still being conducted on how this is affecting all of us, but the fact is that the more we try to control, okay, so the more we research, and I said this earlier, the more we seek to control, the more that need there is to control. And the funny thing about it is nature is not about control. Now, as a human being, we have the ability, we have an extension of an awareness. There is an awareness throughout nature. Nature will just flow. Chemicals are the way nature communicates. And so when there's a chemical sending a message and it's not, it'll make alterations. It'll make changes into the way nature flows. We perceive this as bad, but all it is nature adapting. Like I said, nature doesn't seek to control. Human beings seek to control. And, in some ways, I do understand. It's a delicate balance at this point. We have done so much to this world that trying to control certain aspects is helpful. Okay, it's helpful. So when we take medications, because medications are just that, they're about controlling, they are targeting. So when we're talking about autoimmune disorders, I mean, truthfully, we only have so many chemicals in the body, okay? If we're talking about autoimmune, we're talking about something's been activated by estrogen. It's signal of the release of histamine. So we have an amped up level of histamine. We've also got higher levels of macrophages floating throughout the system, and that's a part of the immune system. What that does is that negates the release of iron from the liver. Now you have fatigue. And if the body's under stress, it alters the ability to break down nutrients because theoretically the body's in survival mode and those chemicals have been rerouted for survival. So when we consistently try to control or seek to control these chemicals, we're hyper-focused and we're missing the stability. And so this is where, as a human species, we have that ability. We have an extension of awareness that can offer stability. Again, symptom relief is very important because it does provide stress relief to the system. It is relieving some degree of stress, but it's not getting to the root of the stress. And the root of the stress are these chemicals. And we honestly are going to have a really difficult time eliminating all these chemicals overnight. So what do? Well, nature has a very strange way of recognizing nature. And I mean, if you don't believe that nature doesn't require us to control anything, I always love to use this example. And that is the time of the Black Plague. Over 70 million people died from that. But this was before vaccinations. And somehow or another, human beings survived it. Because if we didn't, we wouldn't be sitting here talking right now. But somebody in our bloodline survived that plague. And it did not require any human involvement. So nature has the ability to regulate itself. And yet at the same time, we've been gifted the ability and the increasing intelligence to actually expand our awareness so that we can begin to see these things as a natural course. Yes, I mean, I just disagree with blame. And in fact, this is the reason why I'm even talking right now, because I think it takes a shift in our perspective. I work with adults all across the country. And my desire at this point is to really help teach our children how to relate to their bodies differently in a sense that it's functional. I don't want them to grow up thinking that they're going to get older and experience sickness as they get older. I mean, we can't prevent everything, but we can certainly reduce the amount of degeneration that's occurring, and that's going to happen through stability. Now, you might be wondering what do I mean by stability? Well, the fact is, and again, let's go back to histamine as the example. Histamine receptors are require lipophilic chemicals. Histamine is a lipophilic chemical. So there is no amount of food or nutraceutical that you're going to take that is going to help, stabilize the histamine and for that matter, reduce the level of xenoestrogens that we're being exposed to. Yes, there's a lot of people that are going on detoxes, and I do think that that's always a good idea. But you can use the oils as a means of increasing helping the body actually produce the antioxidants that are required to flush the system. Another good example is ammonia. We make our own ammonia. We make ammonia from the proteins that in our diet, and then that ammonia is actually used to produce other enzymes in the body, and then whatever isn't being used is therefore converted into urea for elimination. We are so trying to control ammonia. I've seen a number of naturopaths actually be handing out nutraceuticals that for the CBS gene, because that's where the transsulfurization actually occurs, where we produce ammonia. But believe it or not, through a pairing of your diet, in this case, things like chia seeds, hemp seeds, walnuts, pumpkin seeds, cheese, through a combination of those kinds of foods and combination with your oils, very specific essential oils, we can actually help stabilize. Because keep in mind, the more chemicals we're exposed to, the more the body is in reaction mode. It's actually working to protect us. And again, this is the part that I want people to embrace. I talk an awful lot about working with the healthcare differently than other people. I don't mean that like, hey, I'm like all good and nobody else knows what they're talking about. I just haven't met anyone that works with the body or looks at healthcare like I do, and I've never spoken to anybody that looks at the healthcare like I do. But it is not about control. I mean, again, symptom relief is there's a necessity to that. It is always good to feel good. But if we just stop at control, we're missing the boat. We're not creating stability. And therefore, incorporating, oils, sometimes herbs, but you got to be careful with what you're doing, and nutrition. I mean, there's a way to combine it all in order to create stability. But the most important piece, number one, is to recognize that the body is actually working. It's not dysfunctional, it's actually working. And that's the message that I want to get across to the kids, that if they can actually see that if they're alive and breathing, their body is actually working. It's not dysfunctional, it's not weak. I think it's time to stop relating to our system as unable. It's perfectly able. We just have that extension of awareness to go, hey, wait a minute, where can I put in to help you actually partner with our body? The other thing I think is important to remember is we only have so many chemicals in our system. It's not like I have to say, I have to be careful with what I'm about to say, because they still continue to uncover new hormones at some of the most at the most minute levels. But there again, there's only so many chemicals that we can be producing, and I equal the chemicals in our body to that of a deck of cards. I mean, in a deck of cards, it's 52 cards, which is made up of 4 suits, 13 cards in each suit. That's pretty much what we're dealing with in the body. There's only so many chemicals. If it's in the brain, it's a neurotransmitter. If it's working outside the body, it's considered a hormone. Dopamine in the brain is a neurotransmitter. Dopamine throughout the body has a hormonal effect. Acetylcholine, neurotransmitter and hormone. Serotonin gets converted into melatonin. So, I mean, there are so many chemicals that we have that become changed depending on the body's needs. We have adrenaline, we have noradrenaline. See, cortisol. Oh, there's a good one. Cortisol. We all recognize that as a stress hormone. But cortisol, believe it or not, you guys, is actually used in the body to help reduce inflammation. It is actually meant to be changed, and we can actually produce our own corticosteroids. Instead of having to take steroids as anti-inflammatories, we can actually help regulate our cortisol levels. And a good way to start is with those oils that I listed earlier that actually help to, the carophylline and oxides. There'd be another good way to actually help regulate your cortisol levels or begin to reduce that. Ashwagandha is another one, is an herb that you can actually help to restore, reduce your cortisol load. Again, you have to be careful again because these are suggestions, but that's what that is known for. That is an adaptogenic herb that helps to reduce cortisol loads. I've used that particular herb plenty of times in the case of autism because it's just everybody is how the chemistry is being redirected is what we ended up presenting with when it comes to health issues, is how I want to say that. We have boxed ourselves in this culture as far as identifying health conditions. And the more we seek to label and diagnose, the more we are compartmentalizing ourselves when in fact we're actually dealing with the same chemicals. It's just how they're being moved through the system, how the system is actually using them. And yes, we are seeing some behaviors. We're seeing behaviors which are symptoms. We're seeing signs that the body is unstable. That's how I want to say it. We've labeled them as diseases, as disorders, as problems. I don't see them as such. I see them as signs that the body is unstable. And when we can begin to look at it at that level, I mean, look at this, the two classic cases, psoriasis and varicose veins, man, woman. And both of them are dealing with hormonal instability. So if we can restore stability to the hormonal and the immune system, then we can actually see these symptoms subside. Again, this isn't 100% foolproof. And you might want to just use the oils as you need them. I recommend them on a daily basis because, as I mentioned earlier, and it's something that scientists have recognized for centuries, is that nature has an amazing way of recognizing nature. And the natural lipophilic chemicals, because essential oils are lipophilic. As I mentioned earlier, food is not lipophilic. It is not the signaling molecule. They actually are instrumental in helping to produce lipophilic chemicals. But if we actually need some add-ons to kind of bolster the system, essential oils are your ticket because they are natural for the most part, depending on what company you're dealing with. But if you can find yourself into genuine and authentic essential oils, then you are actually using something that is nature-made, God-made, source-made, however you want to label it, lipophilic chemicals that will actually support stability in this system. It's not about controlling. It's not about taking the place of medication. It's about creating stability. And if you're treating symptoms with medication, there is a way to mix the two. But again, as I mentioned also earlier, you got to be careful with how they interact at the CYP450 enzyme level. That's a really important component there. And as I mentioned earlier, black pepper is a big one. You got to be really careful with black pepper. You got to be really careful with helichrysum because that actually has blood thinning qualities to it. So again, understanding your oils and is a good idea. I'm posting this on my Facebook group, Synergescence, and I'm also posting this on YouTube. So if you are on YouTube and you're watching this, feel free to click in the link in the box below so that I would love to have you join the group. I would love to have live discussions about the oils because that is where I help to deepen our understanding of oils and take your questions, because the way I work with oils is not found in books anywhere. It's really scientifically backed in the way that we are studying plant constituents and the mechanism of action as it relates to drug development. And the reason for that is because drug development really focuses on what chemicals are doing what in the system. And again, I'm not about controlling the system. I'm actually about restoring stability. Sometimes it is about symptom relief. And if we actually understand what constituents provide symptom relief and there's no medications involved, then yay for us. So that's the, he just woke up from a nap after our hike. Anyway, I appreciate you watching, And like I said, I think it's really wise for us to begin to kind of broaden our perspective of health, begin to teach our children that their bodies are working, and that and stability is really what's important. I wish we could eliminate 45 million chemicals, but I don't think we're going to at this point. So we have to learn how to, some battles are worth it, but you gotta figure out where to start. And one thing I've learned through my lifetime is the best place to start is right here, because the more we can strengthen, start from the inside, these things outside of us aren't going to have as much of an impact. Keep in mind, the immune system had the ability to alter itself in the presence of Black Plague that was killing many people. The body did that all on its own. Now there is ring around the rosy, that came about from that time, because the people who were out in the fields picking rose petals are some of the ones that survived. There's something to think about. So including essential oils as an important lipophilic chemical to help override and protect our systems from these xenoestrogens is a very wise decision. And if you're looking for immediate results, then just go to the local pharmacy. You might get I can't make I can't make immediate promises. Everybody is going to respond differently depending on what's going on with the body. But including essential oils, I remember, I have to say this before I close. At one point in one of my histamine videos, I talked about quercetin, and I got so many comments because everybody's like, well, the quercetin didn't work. The quercetin didn't work. Quercetin is actually a bioflavonoid that has been found to help soothe the digestive system and ease some of the challenges with histamine. It Again, it's a bioflavonoid. So, and it's found in things like artichokes. It's found in the white skin of your citrus fruits, and you can even buy it as a supplement form. But if you're looking for immediate results, then you might want to just go to the pharmacy, because quercetin is going to have long-term impact. It's something that would be very beneficial to be including in your diet as far as helping to soothe. Truthfully, carophylline oxides, oils on the abdomen, if you have stomach pain for histamine intolerance or histamine challenges, is a very good idea. So if you have any questions about that, please contact me, Tammy at synergessence.com, and or in the Facebook group. I'm happy to talk with you there about that. But like I said, it does take time, and it is very beneficial, truthfully, to be including these natural lipophilic chemicals to help protect our systems from what we're being exposed to. And there are options for eliminating some of the things, but there's some things that we just can't get away from. So again, thanks for watching. I look forward to connecting with you somewhere outside of YouTube. And until then, have a really blessed day. Bye now.